In our previous video, the direct and indirect pathways in the mediation model were established, and in this video I aim to extend your understanding of mediation by introducing the concepts of direct effect, indirect effect, and total effect. The direct effect of X on Y is essentially the relationship X and Y, the relationship between X and Y that takes into account and controls for the presence of the mediator variable. This is represented in diagrams as C prime, also the C with a little apostrophe above it. I want to stress that the direct effect is not the equivalent to the direct pathway. The direct pathway, or C, is purely just the relationship between X and Y, and this is known as the total effect. The direct effect is the influence that X exerts on Y, controlling for the presence of the mediator variable. So, if we return to our example of positive life events and happiness, and whether that is mediated by gratitude, the direct effect, or C prime, is testing whether the relationship between positive life events and happiness remains significant in the presence of gratitude. To add some figures and hopefully make that a bit clearer, we can see that gratitude is a significant predictor of happiness. What is on the screen there in the blue is the unstandardized regression coefficient, which tells us about the relationship between the variables and also the significance level of the pathway. So in this situation, there is a positive relationship between gratitude and happiness. So as gratitude increases, happiness also increases, and that it is a significant predictor. Now, let's look at C prime. Same information has been reported here. We have the unstandardized regression coefficient of 0.57 telling us that there is a positive relationship between positive life events and happiness. So the more positive events you experience, the happier you are. And here we can also see the p-value telling us that even in the presence of the significant relationship between gratitude and happiness, positive life events predicts happiness, and that is our direct effect. The direct effect essentially represents the mediation pathway. The indirect effect essentially represents the mediation pathway. So it is the effect of the predictor variable on the outcome variables through the mediator, or what Hayes would describe as the test of whether X causes M, which in turn causes Y. This is actually very simple to calculate. If you ever had to do so, it is simply the product of the unstandardized regression coefficients of pathway A and pathway B. You will get a single value for the indirect effect, and that will be either positive or negative. It will be positive if the coefficient for A and B are the same sign, so if they are both positive or both negative. The indirect effect will have a negative value if the A and B coefficients have different signs. So Hayes cautions that we should not try to interpret the indirect effect based upon the sign of the final value, but rather we need to look at the signs of the A and B pathway. This is because the indirect effect may have a sign that differs from the pathway signs. So A and B might both have negative coefficients, yet the indirect effect value will be positive. Therefore, interpreting it as an indication of a positive relationship between variables in the mediation model, such a situation would indeed be incorrect and therefore potentially suggest a theoretical or causal explanation that is inaccurate. So, returning to our example, you can see that I've added in the value for the A pathway and created the indirect effect down the bottom by simply multiplying the two unstandardized regression coefficients, so 0.62 multiplied by 0.37. Now from that, I cannot actually determine whether the indirect effect is statistically significant or not. When we get to doing analysis in SPSS, we will use process, and the analysis will generate confidence intervals for this value. Interpreting the indirect effect using confidence intervals is simple. We need to examine the intervals generated, and essentially we are looking to see if the range of the confidence intervals does not cross zero. If there is no zero in the range, then we can conclude that the indirect effect is likely to be genuine, and we can conclude that the relationship between x and y is mediated by the m variable. In our example, we can see that the 95% confidence interval ranges from from 0.09 to 0.47, so it does not cross zero. Both values are larger than zero, and therefore I can conclude that gratitude does mediate the relationship between positive life events and happiness.